Hi everyone. Are global market shifts and the future of the US dollar weighing on your mind? You've worked hard for your wealth, and concerns about economic uncertainty are completely understandable. Many of our viewers, just like you, are looking for true peace of mind and lasting security. That's why tangible assets like physical gold and silver are becoming a crucial choice for wealth protection and legacy preservation. If you're thinking about how gold and silver could help safeguard your retirement, we invite you to take the next step. At ITM Trading, trusted for almost 30 years, we're here to provide clear, honest information. So take advantage of our free, no obligation consultation with one of our experienced analysts. It's a friendly conversation to explore your options, answer questions, and see if precious metals fits your goals. Call us or visit DannyReport.com to schedule your time. Big legislation happening in the U.S. right now in relation to gold. We just had U.S. Representative Thomas Massie reintroduce the Gold Reserve Transparency Act, a measure to audit the gold in Fort Knox and other places where America's gold is stored. And the state of Florida taking a big step towards making precious metals just as useful as cash. Here to tell us more, Jp Cortez of the Sound Money Defense League. JP, always good to be back with you.
Hi, Daniela. Thank you so much for having me.
Look, there's so much happening across the nation. I wanted you to break it down for us. Let's start with Representative Thomas Massie's new gold audit bill, the Gold Reserve Transparency Act of 2025, and what it aims to achieve for the American public.
So this is a very exciting bill that the Sound Money Defense League and Money Metals Exchange have been working on for years. We worked back in 2019 with Congressman Alex Mooney from West Virginia to introduce this bill, and then again in 2021. So Congressman Massie's version this year is a streamlined, edited, better bill than it's ever been since this idea originated with Ron Paul back in Congress several decades ago. This bill calls for the first comprehensive audit that America's gold has had in at least 6 decades. It's joined by 4 other co-sponsors. We're talking about a full inventory, a full assay, and a full accounting of America's gold holdings. And this comes primarily in response to these calls for transparency. You know, for months now, Elon Musk, who is persona non grata in the administration today, but him along with President Trump and several members of Congress have been talking about the importance of going back into Fort Knox and making sure that the gold is there. On the left, you have calls for transparency and calls for how government institutions should be working for the people. This bill is the intersection between those that can garner bipartisan support, and we're excited to see movement here, and we're hoping to get at least a hearing, if not getting this bill passed and finding out what lies on the other side of the doors of Fort Knox and the other deep storage vaults where America's gold is purportedly stored.
Well, then that leads to my next question. How confident are you that this bill will pass, that we will actually finally get the truth here?
Well, it's an interesting question, and we have more attention attuned to this issue than maybe there's ever been. We're in a new monetary era politically here in the United States and globally. More than ever before, you have President Trump, who has drawn a lot of attention to the gold holdings of the United States. You have BRICS countries talking about establishing a new final currency, settlement currency, moving away from dollar exposure. You have countries like Germany that are actively talking about repatriating their gold, bringing it back out of the clutches of the United States into within their own borders. So politically, we're in an environment that is different from 2019 and 2021 when we previously introduced these bills. 4 sponsors on this bill is a great starting point, and so the next step would be to get a Senate side bill introduced. There are already, fortunately, congressional senators who have spoken favorably about this. Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, son of Dr. Ron Paul, has spoken about the importance of a gold audit. On the west side of the country, Senator Mike Lee from Utah has been a champion for sound money for a long time and has already made comments about how we should open these vault doors and how Americans deserve to know that their gold, because to be sure, this is taxpayer gold, is in fact there. And not only does it need to be there, because the audit is similar to other bills in that it calls for a full assaying and a full inventory of the metal that's in the vaults. But more important than that, this bill does something that has never been done before, which is calling for a full accounting of the metal. The metal might be there, but an ounce of gold can change hands 1,000 times without moving a single inch. So that gold, is it swapped? Is it leased? Is it encumbered in any way? Has it been pledged in some sort of financial arrangement? This audit seeks to answer those questions that have never been answered before. Danielle, I've told you, I'm a fan of your work. So it brought me joy to hear a couple of months ago, Jim Rickards on your channel, talking about how asking the question about leasing gold would be tampering with primal forces. And frankly, I think he's right. If there are questions surrounding America's gold, I'm less concerned about whether it's physically there and more concerned about who owns it outright.
Right.
Because that is the gold of Americans, and that is their gold. And for it to be pledged or collateralized by the United States government without consent would be a scandal of global proportions.
Exactly. Well, exactly. Rickards hammered home the point in that interview, which you're right, it was tremendous, of, if it's there, how many times was it leased and to whom? I guess I have to ask you the question, what's your hunch, JP, right now?
My hunch is that the gold is probably physically there. There are questions about what that means, though, and there are things that should be examined within that. The gold is, in fact, there, but it's not liquid. It is not meeting global market standards as it exists today. A lot of the gold bars in America's holdings are coin bars. These are 90% bars that were melted down into this raw, unrefined bar. This doesn't meet global standards. It's not tradable today. So any subsequent legislation should definitely include a refinement process, because this is something that would take time and would be expensive. But what good is a global gold reserve if it's not liquid? So it's important that even if the gold is there, there are questions about its liquidity today, and there would be a process necessary to do refinement on this gold.
I'm just thinking, wouldn't that just absolutely shatter all confidence if they find out it's not truly liquid? What would that do to the market?
Think this is already known. It's already known. This is already information that's out there. We know that those bars are not liquid. We know that they're not marketable today. And that's why the importance of this legislation, of course, calling for the audit and the accounting and all of that. But any subsequent legislation should include this, because like you said, what good is it if it doesn't actually have any market value to us? So the legislation, too, unlike anything that's ever been done before or looked at this gold, and like I mentioned, it's at a time where the world is actively asking questions and the global confidence in the dollar is waning. So more than ever before, there's an impetus for this legislation. The United States would be well served, and taxpayers, of course, would be well served to find out what's in those vaults. Because the truth is, the questions surrounding these gold holdings are entirely legitimate. The reason these questions exist are because of shady practices by the American government and the U.S. Treasury surrounding this gold. And frankly, the act that this takes, an act of Congress, is quite absurd. If the stewards of America's greatest monetary asset were transparent and forthright, they would be including these disclosures. They would be happily engaging in these audits. But they have been unwilling to do so to this point. So now it takes a point where we have to force them to do so with an act of Congress. And so that's what we're doing here.
When you say this bill would help restore confidence in the U.S. dollar at a time when obviously central banks are greatly reducing their USD exposure, how can it bring confidence back? How would that help?
Well, the benefit of gold, the many benefits of gold, among them are the fact that it's not inflatable. It's that it's politically neutral. And so at a time when the United States has been weaponizing its currency for decades, using sanctions and other tools to harm their enemies and to help their friends, using the dollar as a cudgel, countries worldwide are coalescing around a political alternative. That has been gold. So if the United States wants to remain a leader, if the United States wants to bolster confidence in the long-term stability of its currency, the best thing that it could possibly do would be reattach it back to the greatest global monetary asset that the world has seen over thousands of years.
One more point before we move on to Florida. What might influence the success or failure of this bill?
Fortunately, like I mentioned, we've got 4 co-sponsors already and people on the Senate side that are excited to see this happen. It's an interesting time because the White House itself has already said, Donald Trump himself has already said, he wants to know what's behind the doors at those vaults. So the question now becomes about grassroots. Daniela, I'm sure you know through the comments on your videos, anytime you spend on Twitter or online or on YouTube, second maybe to calls to audit the Federal Reserve, right behind those are calls, a cacophony of calls to audit America's gold holdings. There's intense grassroots fervor on this issue. So what it needs to do now is to be directed. We need to point it in a way that's effective and so that legislators know that this isn't something that they will continue to be able to push down the line. They've done that for decades. And frankly, it's also important to say that the audits that exist today that are already in place. The GAO and Secretary Bassett has gone on air talking about how America's gold is audited. Those audits absolutely cannot be trusted. They cannot be trusted. And what I can tell you is that audits are not a one and done thing like they're doing here with American gold. The holders of American gold have been telling you, oh, well, we audited the gold in there decades ago, and there's no need to go in and recheck the box. We're just checking the seals. And they're checking the schedule of seals on these boxes without checking the inside. An audit of a lock on a door is not the same as checking what's on the other side of that door. Secretary Bassett is being misled by sleight of hand by accountants and auditors. America's gold has not gotten a proper audit, not in any comprehensive way, and it deserves one.
Let's turn our attention to Florida. I know you don't work on this bill, but we know that DeSantis signed a bill earlier this month to start the process of making gold and silver legal tender in Florida. So starting July 1st of this year, the bill requires all coins to be stamped with weight, purity, and mint of origin. It specifies that using it or accepting it is optional. Purchases of precious metal would be exempt from sales taxes, but gold and silver could be used to pay other kinds of taxes. Thoughts on what's going on in Florida? How promising is this? What does it mean?
For a long time, I have said that the greatest impediment today to people using gold and silver as money is the friction of taxes. Because of sales tax, because of capital gains tax, virtually any time you went to use your gold and silver, you would trigger a taxable event. There's too much friction on the metal for it to operate on smooth rails. So by removing the sales tax on gold and silver in Florida, that in and of itself was a massive step forward. Florida has something we call a threshold tax, or at least before this bill, it had something called a threshold tax. There are only about 4 states in the United States that still do this today, where they put a dollar number on the exemption. So if in Florida's case, it was $500. So if you bought less than $500 at a time, the transaction would trigger a sales tax of 6, 7, 8%, depending on local and state sales tax. But if you bought above $500, the state doesn't charge you any tax at all. That's completely regressive, and it completely makes it impossible for anyone to slowly get into gold and silver through dollar cost investing, through any sort of, going to the local coin shop and buying a silver eagle at a time to pass down to your grandkids. They would be charged a tax for doing that. So by eliminating that tax, Florida becomes, as of today, as of this recording, 46 states in the country either partially or fully exempt this tax. I'm actually happy to say that there's a bill, we talked about it a little off air, there's a bill sitting before a governor today that will hopefully be signed imminently that, again, removes these taxes from gold and silver. So this is part of a larger movement. Of course, the Florida bill also addressed legal tender. This is something that has passed in several states as well. I believe as of today, there are 8 or 9 states that have passed this, Florida being the most recent. But earlier this year, Alabama, we worked to pass it in Alabama. Louisiana passed it earlier this year. Oklahoma has done it.
Yep.
Utah has done it. So there are more and more states that are reaffirming the constitutional enshrinement of gold and silver as the nation's money and reaffirming it in state law. So the Florida bill is an exciting and just the latest of dozens and dozens of bills that have passed over the last more than a decade now. The Sound Money Defense League has been working on these since 2014. Since we've been doing it, there's been more than 30 bills that have been enacted into law, not counting the Florida bill that recently passed. So it's a very exciting time. There are more voices speaking to this than ever before. more people are generally more attuned to the money, because you can no longer deny that there's a monetary issue here. For a long time, there was no inflation, and then it was transitory, and then it was the war, and then it was the grocery store CEOs, and most recently, it's these oscillating Donald Trump tariffs. But we know that inflation is a monetary phenomenon, and so long as the government keeps printing, this is going to be bullish for gold and silver long-term as an asset, and as its potential as a future money to be rediscovered as the greatest money, nature's money, that the world has ever seen.
Well, the people have definitely spoken, JP. It just makes me wonder, as a final note here, what the Fed is thinking about all this. Gold is rising up, silver's rising up. Exactly.
They can't be happy about it. And frankly, this is long overdue. The Federal Reserve and the Congress that has allowed this profligate spending are due for a reckoning. This is a monetary shibboleth. This idea that countries and individuals can gain wealth off of the printing of paper and that societies can thrive that way is a fool's errand. And the sooner that we reinstate sound money, the sooner that we reinstitute gold and silver into these institutions, the sooner this nightmare ends.
Let's see. Jp Cortez, he knows his stuff. Thank you so much for informing us and keeping us up to date on everything happening here. Good stuff. Thank you, Jp Cortez of the Sound Money Defense League.
Thank you, Daniela.
And thank you all for watching. More great content coming your way. And of course, if you want more information about investing in gold and silver, we just have a ton of great reports for you. They're all free and they're all now centralized in one location, DannyReport.com. Check it out. That's it for me. We'll see you soon.